Hello everybody, I'm Melissa and welcome back to Book Bar and welcome to my favorite video of the month to make, my July stats and faves. So if you're new here, this is where I discuss my favorite books of the month and all of my stats and everything. I read a lot, so my wrap-ups end up having quite a bit of, like, they end up being kind of long because I talk about the books that I read a lot. And so I decided to just do stats and faves. But in the month of July, I read I completed a total of 30 books. I DNF'd one and I'm carrying one over into August. Of course, I read 14 books in the first half of the month, which is in my mid-month wrap-up. And then I read 17-ish books in the second half of the month, which is in my end-of-month wrap-up. But you're all here for the fun stuff, which is my stats and my favorites for the month. So, like I said, I read a total of 30 books with one DNF and one that I'm currently reading. So 32 books started. I read around 11,458 pages. So although my quantity was lower than it's been in past months, actually the page count is higher than it's been. One of my higher months. My average rating was only 4.3 stars, which is not great. I read 9 5 stars, 9 4.5 stars, 6 4 stars, 4 3.5 stars, 1 3 star. I had 1 DNF and 1 book that I didn't rate. I didn't rate my DNF either, but I read a total, I read 28 romance books, 2 fantasy, and 1 nonfiction. The subgenre for romance breakdown, I read 19 contemporary. I've been really in like a sports romance, small town romance mood. I think next year I might actually break down my subgenres even further than just contemporary and dark and fantasy and historical. I might do like sports, small town, because those are kind of subgenres within the contemporary subgenre. So we'll see. That's next year's problem. But I read 3 fantasy romances, 2 dark romances, and 4 historical romances. My highest read day was July 14th. I read 642 pages that day, or read and listened. My lowest read day will come as a surprise. It was July 4th, holiday. I spent the day with my family, hanging out, swimming, eating, drinking, just generally having a good time with my family on a day off. So I only read 23 pages that day. I listened to 13 audiobooks. I read 10 ebooks, 9 that I finished, and then the book I'm currently reading and carried over is an ebook. 2 physical books only, and then 7 that I read and listened, whether it's ebook and audio or physical and audio. Most were physical and audio. I found that I've been really enjoying doing that, like reading physically and having the audiobook going too. And now for the best part, my top 5. We're going to start with my honorable mentions. This month, my top 5 is actually a top 8 because top 7, because the way my spreadsheet works, the number 5 was all tied. There were 3 books that all had the same total score. So I just counted them all because I loved them all and I didn't want to pick just one. So my honorable mentions, my first one is A Court of Mist and Fury. This came in higher than the books ranked at number 5, but this is a reread, so it doesn't really count. I absolutely love this. This is the second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. This and A Court of Silver Flames are like my 2 favorites. I don't know which one's my absolute favorite, but once I reread Silver Flames, I'll let you know if I can even decide then. But we read this for the SJM along. We talked about it for 3 hours, gushing about it. It was fantastic. I had a great time. Of course, honorable mention. And my other honorable mention is The Empire of Gold by Chakraborty. I loved this series. This was my first high fantasy series where I read the whole thing. I read one each month, and I just absolutely adored it. I can't really say much about the 3rd book, but the other 2 were also in my honorable mentions. Again, I can't count them as favorites because the way I rate my books is a little different, because obviously I'm primarily a romance reader, so romance books generally rate higher on my spreadsheet that I have. But now we're gonna get into it with my three that were tied at number 5. I have 5 Rounds by Nikki Castle. I actually read this for a vlog where I collabed with Tori from Novel Life. I'll link the vlog above, but I read new to me authors and I loved this one. This was a enemies to lovers, forced proximity, they become roommates. So it's Tristan and why can't I think of her name? Why? Oh, I have my thing right here. Tristan and Remy, and Tristan wants to be an MMA fighter, and Remy works out at the MMA gym, and her best friend Jackson also works out there, and he is roommates with Tristan. And Remy has gotten evicted because her landlord's family needs the place that she's living in. So she's been evicted, and she has like a couple weeks before her new apartment's available and she can move in from when she has to leave her old one. So she calls up her friend Jax and he's like, hey, can I stay with you for these 2 weeks? And he goes, oh, this actually works out perfectly. I'm going to be gone for those 2 weeks. So you can just stay in my room. It's fine. It'll be great. You will have to live with Tristan though. And of course, she lives with Tristan and their antagonistic relationship leads to some great hate sex. And then, of course, their hate sex turns to not so hate sex. And it was great. I loved it. Of course, all of these are 5. One is a 4.5, but they're all 5 stars. My 4.5 star book, which is also tied for this, is Inevitable Conclusions by Christina C. Jones. The only reason this is a 4.5 is because I hated that they also... I mean, they were never really, there was no cheating. It wasn't a cheating romance or anything, but they slept with other people in this book. And I don't love that in my romance books. When they're actively sleeping with other people. No, neither of them were in relationships with these other people. They were just sleeping with other people. But they're 2 best friends. Let me find problems here. With reading so many, I need to find where it was. Tariq and Cora, they are childhood best friends. They grew up like next door to each other or close by, and they've always kind of hooked up when they're both single, but when they are in serious relationships, they don't hook up anymore. But they've stayed really good friends. Cora is a single mom. Her daughter is grown. She's 21, I think. She turns 21 in the book. But they end up realizing that they can't live without each other, and they decide to finally give in and be together for real. But yeah, like I said, I don't love when they sleep with other people in a romance book. I mean, especially like so far into it. Like, I get it if it's like the beginning, but this was like at like the 50-ish% mark, they were still sleeping with other people, which I don't love. But it ended up being a favorite of the month. But then the next book that I read, or the last book in my number 5 spot, is The Foxe and the Hound by R.S. Gray. This is a rom-com, and basically, why can't I think today? Madeline and Adam. Madeline has this big, huge dog who's just a puppy who she thought was only going to be like 30 pounds and ends up being this like giant like Burmese mountain dog or something like that. And he kind of runs over Adam, who's this new guy in town who ends up actually being the veterinarian. And Adam and Madeline just cannot stay away from each other. And even though they did not get off on the right foot, they of course are going to fall in love. Then in number 4, I have Blame It on the Champagne, which was my Instagram viewers picked what I read vlog. I'll link it up above. But I absolutely adored this. This had like all of my favorite buzzwords: age gap, boss employee, revenge plot, marriage of convenience, all of the things. Kind of enemies to lovers, because even though they're like attracted to each other, Nico is like pushing back on Vera when they first meet and is really mean to her. But of course, Nico finds out who Vera really is. She is this heiress to a shipping company, and her dad she wants to work for her dad, and her dad's like, no, you're going to get married to who I tell you to marry, and you're going to be a happy little wife and not worry about working. And she's like, but I don't want to do that. So her friend's like, why don't you use a different last name and work for like a small company? So she starts to work for Nico's company. Well, when Nico finds out who she is, he's like, oh, well, you don't want to get married. How about you and I get married? To throw a wrench in your dad's plans. Of course, Nico has plans of his own that might not be above board, but it was great. I loved it. The next book that and then number 3 is Blindsided by Amy Daws. This is a sports romance with the teach me trope, which is one of my favorites. Freya and Mac. Mac is this big soccer player, and Freya is a curvy girl, and her and Mac have never really been attracted to each other, but when Mac finds out that she is a virgin, they end up deciding to try. He's like, oh, I'll have, and she's like, well, how about you teach me? So, of course, they then hook up, and of course, they're going to fall in love. Then number 2, my second favorite book is The Consequence of Falling by Contreras. I adored this. I also read this for the Trying New Author vlog that I collabed with Tori on. This was Nathaniel and Presley, and they were like, Presley was the daughter of a very wealthy man, and she met Nathaniel when she was kind of young, because Nathaniel like picked her up from school one day, and he's kind of been on like the outskirts of her life, but she's always felt like Nathaniel had a better bond with her dad than she did, and she hated that, and so they pushed each other away, and they end up having to work together on a new project for the brewery that her dad owns, and they of course fall in love. And I just, this book was beautiful. It was heartbreaking at times. Absolutely loved it. And then my favorite book of the month will come as no surprise to anyone that has been watching for a while. This was also in my Instagram chooses what I read vlog. This was A Love Letter to Whiskey by Kandi, Steiner. This book is just stunning. I absolutely adored it. I just could not put it down, and it's a new fave. Probably will be one of my top faves of the year. Adored it, loved it, cannot gush about it enough. But yeah, that is my favorite books and all of my stats for this month. Let me know. Oh, and I did talk about this in my wrap-ups, but I did start a game, and I completed it. Well, completed it, and I have one continuing, but I will go over what I read for my game. Sports romance, I read 5 Rounds by Nikki Castle. Gifted, I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Recently hauled, I read Wretched by Emily McIntyre. Random number generator, I read Meant to Be by Jennifer Probst. 12 from 12 is the one that I am continuing into August, and that is The War of Two Queens by Jennifer Armentrout. My mom chose Ignite by Melanie Harlow. She also chose The Consequence of Falling. And my new release that I read, American Heiress in Paris. Or A Caribbean Heiress in Paris. Sorry, A Caribbean Heiress in Paris was my new release. But yeah, that is all I have for now. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It really helps me out. I will talk to y'all in the next one. Bye!